Harold Sherman, the well-known writer and psychic, once said that of all the men he had met, Ambrose Worrall was, spiritually speaking, the most profound. Ambrose was a seer and a sensitive of the first order. His knowledge of spiritual matters was not gained from books, but from first-hand encounters with the unseen world. He took no money for the exercise of his spiritual gifts and generously shared his knowledge and experience with those who were actively seeking spiritual development. He earned his living as an aeronautical engineer. A seminar on the gifts of the Spirit, consisting of 4 lectures, was given on consecutive Sunday afternoons, starting on January 9, 1972, at Mount Washington United Methodist Church. On February 2, 1972, Ambrose's earthly healing ministry ended. He continues his work in the realm of spirit. The title of Lecture 1 is Developing a Personal Philosophy. Selected answers by Ambrose Worrall to questions from the audience will follow the lecture.
Well, in this subject, of course, there are all kinds of words used. And the reason we have so many attorneys is because there are so many different meanings to words. It is useful in religion to talk about things eternal. Well, the word eternal strictly signifies without beginning or end. And the only thing that we can say is eternal is the divine being. We also talk about everlasting. Everlasting applies to that which may or may not have a beginning, but it will never cease. The word immortal applies to that which now has life and is forever exempt from death. We consider the soul to be immortal. It now has life. We consider it forever to be exempt from death. The word infinite is a very entrancing word. Actually, it means unlimited by time or space. It signifies that which is without bounds of any kind. However, in modern mathematics, they got into a little trouble with things that have no boundaries. So to them, in mathematics and science, infinite means that an end or limit cannot be determined, not that there is no end or limit. Now, in theological or philosophical language, we speak of the ideas of God. The word idea in Greek means a form or shape or image. It signified in earlier philosophical use the archetype or primal image which the Platonic philosophy supposed to be the model or pattern that so-called existing objects imperfectly embody. Think about that. Any object you see is imperfect, yet the primal image of that object is perfect according to the Platonic philosophy. So if you see a little imperfection in the rest of us around here, knowing that each one of us is perfect, then you know that the manifestation has got a little adultery mixed in it there, and it is no longer the pure original essence of the idea. Life, of course, is something we're always talking about. What does it mean? It means a spiritual existence transcending physical death. In other words, death does not end life. On earth, we look upon it as the sequence of mental and physical experiences that make up the existence of an individual. And to many of us, that is all there is to life. Interest or concern vary with the conditions of a person's mind. Thus, some dwell only on the immediate problem or object of desire, while others try to focus their attention on some state of oblivion to care, pain, or external reality through the extinction of desire and individual consciousness. While it may be an interesting mental and spiritual exercise to contemplate the possibility of reaching that state of utmost bliss, the final beatitude that transcends all suffering, and to cogitate upon the ruggedness of the path that one must travel as an individual to approach or gain the ultimate reality, whether it be through belief in salvation that permits passage through the gates into heaven, the dwelling place, of course, of the deity, or through samsara, the indefinitely repeated cycles of birth, misery, and death to reach the state of nirvana. Most of us are and should be concerned with a small portion of the spiritual path, which consists of our remaining earthly lifespan and the continuing life immediately hereafter. And our discussions will be kept within this range. So I've reduced it to practically nothing, haven't I? But as we go on, you'll find there's plenty to talk about, even in this limited range. For our purpose, we shall consider the individual to be immortal. I know there are people who think that death ends all, but we are not considering that, or we can't talk about the future life, can we? So the individual has life everlasting. He has infinite possibilities within the immutable law of the ultimate reality. His spiritual progress is determined by the thoughts entertained in his mind. He has the opportunity to consciously idealize the divine idea or image, which is the essence of his being, and as a part of all creation, his dynamic thinking has an effect upon the whole. That's something to think about, isn't it? That you, as you think, have an effect upon the whole. Our intent is to examine our present positions as individually evaluated and plan our future spiritual endeavors so that our every effort will be meaningful to our spiritual progress and for the benefit of the whole. We shall consider the average normal person's position with respect to spiritual understanding. The perplexities created by different schools of religious thought which puzzle and often worry him as to how he should act or decide. The bewilderment that causes him to lose his bearings and the possibility of confusion that will make him unable to think clearly, making it essential that he find a reasonable set of principles to show him the way. Then, hopefully, we shall develop a guide so that each may form a personalized philosophy on which to base his immediate and near future spiritual efforts and actions. By following the path dictated by our personalized philosophies, we anticipate that each will become more deeply aware of the reality and nearness of spirit, that there will occur an expansion of the understanding of immutable laws, an increase in capacity to receive guidance from spirit, and a broadening of powers to serve effectively for the benefit of all. The normal average person lives by a set of rules which governs his thinking and his behavior. This is his religion. It may not be exactly what he professes to follow in accordance with denominationalism, but it is a set of rules which governs his life. Now, religion has been defined as a personal set or institutionalized system of religious attitudes, beliefs, and practices. Institutionalized religions carry names such as Buddhist, Christian, Confucian, Hindu, Jewish, Muslim, Shinto, Taoist, and Zoroastrian. We're not going to change anybody's religious denomination. Whatever we develop here, we simply add to what we have and hope that it improves it. Because of major differences of opinion, most religious sects have become divided amongst themselves. For example, the Christian religion, we might say, has three major bodies: Roman Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, and Protestant, while the Jewish religion has its Orthodox, Conservative, and Reformed bodies. All these things come about because of differences of opinion and differences in interpretations. Within religious bodies, other differences of opinion result in further separations into denominations. Thus, one may be a Christian of Protestant persuasion, but of the Lutheran denomination, holding membership in the Lutheran Church of America, which was organized in the year 1962 by the consolidation of the American Evangelical Lutheran Church of 1874, the Augustana Evangelical Lutheran Church of 1860, the Finnish Evangelical Lutheran Church of 1890, and the United Lutheran Church in America of 1918. This shows how first we get separated, then we get back together again. Now, there are hundreds of different creeds, probably thousands if we go down into the lesser known ones. And a creed is a set of fundamental beliefs. Included in the beliefs are acceptances of different doctrines to support the creeds. The doctrines include dogmas, which are points of view or tenets put forth as authoritative without adequate grounds. Just like the executive of the company says, "Why do you do that?" He said, "It's just policy." That's supposed to be the answer. Through all this confusion passes a thread of truth. And the thinking man tries to find it. And in doing so, finds he is developing his own personal set of religious attitudes, beliefs, and practices. It is personal because it is acceptable to him. He understands it and is happy to entertain it because it appeals to his highest sense of what is right and just. The thinking man never ceases to search. He finds truth to be disguised in many ways. He finds himself exploring wider and wider territory until he realizes that he must embrace the whole before he can understand the part. Thus he finds himself beyond religion and involved in philosophy, which is a discipline comprising logic, aesthetics, ethics, metaphysics, and epistemology. All those $10 words simply explain philosophy. Now, logic is the science of the normative formal principles of reasoning. In other words, you're supposed to think logically, use reasoning. It deals with the canons and criteria of validity of inference and demonstration. This means that the philosopher, our thinking man, must have sufficient knowledge of the subject involved to enable him to determine in his own mind that the inference or demonstration has sufficient force to compel acceptance. To put it in the modern language, do you buy it or don't you buy it? When we speak of metaphysics, we must include the theory of the nature and relations of being and the kinds of existence. This is known as ontology. Cosmology is another branch of metaphysics that deals with the universe as an orderly system. And after you get deeply enough into the study of reality, you will come to the conclusion that everything is orderly in the universe. It has been said that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, and this can be true. In fact, knowledge itself is subject to critical examination, especially with reference to its limits and validity. Such a study is called epistemology. Metaphysical research will show the lack of validity in some writings, and statements will be uncovered that do not have the quality which makes them acceptable. Obviously, the thinking man's philosophy must include the pre-physical state and contemplation of the transcendent, which in theology means pertaining to God. That's what transcendent means to the theologian, pertaining to God. He is aware of two major divisions, which at his present state of understanding he classifies as the known and the unknown. Later he may change this to the knowable and the unknowable. If he's a little thinker, he says, well, I don't think I'll ever find out all there is to know. But some things I am sure I will find about. I'll know about it. The knowable and the unknowable. The unknowable being that which produces the knowable. Eventually, the thinking man, basing his decision on sound premises, arrives at the conclusion that what he has really discovered is that there is the Creator and there is that which has been created, or which is being created, because creation never ceases. The thinking man has a flexible philosophy which changes as his knowledge and awareness increase. He is not limited by the chains of dogma, nor hampered by the boundaries of creeds. Such a man at some point in time could arrive at certain reasonable conclusions, such as, man limits all things manifest by applying some form of measurement. He may say that a point has position but no size. But if it has position, it is located in space, which raises the interesting question as to what is space. One definition of space is a boundless three-dimensional extent in which objects and events occur and have relative position and direction. If all objects and events are removed from space, then space itself is unnecessary. And the conclusion is that both space and time come into being as the indispensable conditions for any physical manifestation. Since the space-time continuum is without limitations, having a character completely indeterminable in theory or in fact by enumeration, measurement, or conceptualization, it becomes necessary to consider the transfinite state or the pre-physical condition. In the physical condition, we are familiar with different states of the same natural material. Oxide of hydrogen, commonly known as H2O, we know as a solid in the form of ice, as water in the liquid state, as water vapor diffused in the atmosphere, and as steam, the invisible vapor into which water is converted when heated to the boiling point. These four states are all oxide of hydrogen, or H2O. It is logical to believe that in the pre-physical condition, there are also various states or differences in densities of ethereal substances. Eventually, we must consider the absolute, that which is free from limitation by other authorities, physical or pre-physical, the supreme ruler of all things, the ultimate reality which theologians call God and which science may call immutable law. We are well acquainted with the word beginning. Somebody's always starting something. Beginning. We find it early in the Bible, don't we? In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Science is sure of the fact that something had a beginning many billions of years ago. The exact state at which anything really begins is shrouded in mystery, so we have to provide a reasonable philosophy. When something happens, we look for the cause. Every time there's an accident, a fire, an explosion, they look for the cause. This does not appear to be difficult at first sight, but when we have found the cause, it turns out really to be an effect of a previous cause. The house blew up because of an explosion of gas. Why did the gas get there in the first place? There was a cause for the gas getting there in the first place. And you can go on back, and back, and back. And this gave rise to a Latin expression which translated into English says, the cause of the cause is the cause of the effect. Following the chain of effects back through time, we always arrive at the beginning. The original cause, sometimes referred to as the first great cause, the act of causation which results in creation. In other words, we are back to God. The words which we must try to understand are contained in the phrase, in the beginning. This takes us back in time beyond recorded history, beyond our powers of visualizing the instance of the beginning, even to the condition when time did not exist. Giving proper consideration to these thoughts, we conclude that the term the beginning applies to every creative act, that creation is a continuous operation, and that the beginning is a series of events coeval with eternity. Therefore, an important maxim in our philosophy is that the beginning is now. Take a look at the common centigrade thermometer. This is an instrument which features a scale on which the interval between the freezing point and the boiling point of water is divided into 100 degrees. 0 degrees representing the freezing point and 100 degrees the boiling point. This is a man-made instrument by which man can demonstrate the immutable laws governing the simple compound H2O. In other words, an experiment conducted under laboratory conditions can be repeated over and over again with the same results. The man begins to believe it then. It is scientifically demonstrated. There's another familiar term called the dew point. This is the temperature at which water vapor begins to condense into liquid water. It varies with the humidity of the atmosphere, but nevertheless it follows or obeys certain immutable laws known to science. We can then in a simple way simulate creation by studying changes that take place in oxide of hydrogen. Pass from the invisible steam. Steam is invisible. What you see as steam coming out of the kettle is water vapor. But if you look very close to the spout, you will find there's a little area there in which you don't see any of this water vapor. That is steam. So we're passing then from the invisible through water vapor down into water, down into ice. We've gone from the invisible to something that is solid. And perhaps this gives you an idea of how things are created. First of all, they are created in the invisible, by the idea being put into image form, and the immutable law takes care of bringing it forth into manifestation. Each of the foregoing creative changes involves time. It takes several minutes for water to reach boiling point to make the morning coffee. The layman determines lapse of time by the use of a measuring instrument such as a clock or watch. He can actually use time for many things. He can sit and look at it, see his life ticking away, second by second. Not a very good use of time. However, he thinks he knows what time is as he sees the seconds ticking off on his watch. Yeah, he knows what a second is. He can even think 1001, 1002. Those are seconds, see? Well, this second is called a unit of time. And what could be simpler? Up till 1972, it was related to the rotation of the Earth on the axis. But if you read this morning's paper, you'll find now that it's done by an atomic clock using cesium. And it's supposed to be accurate to 1 second in 100,000 years. However, up to 1972, it was just a little different. And if we look at the second as it appears to the ordinary everyday man, we say the Earth rotates in a 24-hour day. And that means there's 86,400 seconds in one day. However, because of the elliptical path traveled by the Earth around the Sun, the time varies from day to day throughout the year. Therefore, a second is a variable quantity of time. To satisfy the requirements of science, it was decided by international agreement that the year 1900 was exactly 31,556,925.9747 seconds long. How accurate is your watch? But this shows you how the simplest thing can become so complicated. And I suppose these finer measurements are required when you start talking about traveling to Mars and distant places in space. We don't want to get into these complexities in our study, but you can bet that all complexities are governed by immutable law. And it is the interference of one law with another that brings about the complexities. Creation itself is a very simple thing. It's the complexities of the manifestation that get us confused. And this is why that any law determined by the scientific method must of necessity carry with it a statement as to the conditions that must prevail to demonstrate the law. You want to prove your thermometer is right, you've got to have absolutely pure water. You've got to have sea level pressure. Otherwise the boiling point is different. You change those conditions. But we like the scientific approach. But here's what science actually does. It takes 2 points in the creative chain of events and measures the differences in the observed results. That's why it leaves both ends open when it tries to define infinity. The infinitely small is something smaller than you can imagine, and the infinitely great is something greater than you can imagine. And by scientific method it knows, and it admits it knows only in part. But that part it knows very well. The ethereal, the mental, the spiritual laws are relatively unknown. Theology, which deals with God and his relation to the world, tries to give rational answers to complete the picture of creation and show that the universe is theonomous. Theonomous simply means governed by God. And that all creation is a theophany. That simply means a manifestation in the visible of a deity. In other words, without God, nothing is. That's the theological standpoint, and who's to argue? But the average man finds difficulty in reconciling theological theory with the facts of life. Should have read a letter I got from a Roman Catholic priest trying to find in theology the answers to pestilence, earthquakes, catastrophes of all kinds, like cyclones destroying thousands of people. And his letter told me he couldn't find the answer to this, and he couldn't figure out how they could talk about the love of God and have these other things going on they couldn't explain. And this is a theologian teaching in a Roman Catholic college who had become so upset that he said he could no longer say Mass in public. So even in the high theological levels you find confusion. We are going to try not to be confused. So the average man, like this Roman Catholic priest, which is probably not average, but he was trying to find an explanation somewhere to satisfy his inquiring mind. And he's not going to find it easy. He takes the most acceptable ideas from philosophy and science And forming a combination, he may be able to get a basis that will satisfy his spiritual and psychical growth. And I expect he eventually will find a personalized philosophy. And that's what we're all going to be seeking, a personalized philosophy. So there is a philosophy that we may use as a guide in spiritual unfoldment, and we need it, because if you're going to open the psychic door, you had better be able to control what's coming in that door. And your philosophy will teach you how to control what comes into your mind through the psychic door. So first of all, we postulate the existence of a supreme being. The only way you can describe a supreme being is to give that supreme being certain attributes which include but are not limited to such things as omniscience. You don't hear that word too often. It means the quality of being unlimited in creative ability. Omniscience. Omnipotence, everybody knows, that means having unlimited power and influence. Omniscience means possessed of complete knowledge. And omnipresence, capable of being present in all places at all times. We might say that these are the main attributes of a supreme being. Obviously, nothing can compete with such a supreme being, so everything that happens must be in accordance with his laws. It is common practice to hold some mythical character responsible for everything that brings sorrow, suffering, distress, misfortune, or calamity. But there is no place in this philosophy for Lucifer, Satan, devil, prince of darkness, or any other being of like nature. And the reason for this is that to recognize such a being would be to give it power over us, because this is the way the human mind works. Nothing exists to a person except what he has in his mind. You don't think about the devil, he doesn't exist. And don't use him for a fall guy. That which seems to be real to us, we describe as the material universe. We register its presence with the physical senses. I touch, I smell, I hear, I see, and so forth. How extensive is your universe? Is it limited to the 5 physical senses? Each one has a different conception depending on amount of knowledge acquired and the degree of imagination. Some think of the universe as being 3-dimensional. Others call it an omniverse. And an omniverse is a universe that is spatio-temporally 4-dimensional, which means they have added a time coordinate to the 3 rectangular coordinates of length, breadth, and thickness. Then there is the idea of an expanding universe, a relativistic concept of the material universe, according to which all celestial bodies are becoming steadily farther apart, with the result that those more remote recede from the earth at greater speeds. Now it's getting to be very complicated, isn't it? If you read this morning's paper, you'll find a statement in there that the earth is slowing down something like 1 second a year or something of this nature. In other words, the rotation of the earth is not constant. It's slowing down. Why? Still part of its creative path. Now, we slow down a little bit as we get older. Same way, we don't last quite as long as the earth, apparently. The latest scientific thinking is that we are dealing with force fields and energy pattern interferences that give the appearance of solid material things. Yeah, the advanced scientists say that this stuff that looks real, that isn't real at all. Quite a change from what it used to be 100 years ago. The air one still may seem relatively unreal. You put your hand up, you don't feel much, do you? But in a tornado, it acts like a solid battering ram that can destroy towns and move heavy material with ease. Recently saw a bank building where a tornado that took the entire front, was made of marble, wiped it right off the building, but left the windows in. Tremendous force. This stuff you can't even feel when you put your hand up. But when there's an interference pattern, it becomes very real and solid. The direction of thinking today is towards accepting the idea that the real things are invisible and bring into manifestation the less than real things which make up the material realm. Viewing these step-down signs or indications of reality in its broadest sense, we conclude that pure 100% reality can exist only in the Supreme Being. Now let's take a composite picture of cause and effect, God and creation, man and his free will. The cause is that which is responsible for all effects. The cause we call God is responsible for all creation. God is the immutable law, complete and infallible. The immutable law always works, never fails. It governs all effects and holds sway over the entire universal operation, from the beginning of each creative act through its completion. God has no magnitude. He is without dimensions. He cannot be measured or weighed. He is in a state of perfection. He cannot be observed except through his manifestations. God has complete knowledge of all that can be conceived. Every possible idea, form, pattern, or system, and every problem with the solution to each problem. God has the power exercised through his will to produce any conceivable manifestation. God brings all things into being through the creative act. The creative act can be understood best by supposing that it takes place in a series of successive steps. 1, God selects pure ideas from his complete store of knowledge. 2, molds them into form by the power of his will. And this is the beginning. This is what puts act into action and starts the creative process. And 3, God's immutable law takes control and an observable manifestation is born. A very brief description of creation. And man, of course, is made like unto God. He also is a creator, a sub-creator, if you wish to call it that. He selects ideas, puts them into form, and brings them out as a manifestation through his will. All within the immutable law, of course. We cannot conceive of the creation of anything without the use of motion. If I try to do a simple thing like write a word, motion is involved. If I write that word, it takes time and space. Motion, space, and time form a trinity, a union of 3 in 1. They coexist as necessary essentials indispensable to the creative. We cannot conceive of the creation of anything without the use of motion. If I try to do a simple thing like write a word, motion is involved. If I write that word, it takes time and space. Motion, space, and time form a trinity, a union of 3 in 1. They coexist as necessary essentials indispensable to the creative act. Life is God expressing himself through his creations. Life is not confined to things material, but is also present in the pre-physical and post-physical states. Man is created in the image of God. This statement does not refer to the physical body of flesh, nor to the spiritual body, which is composed of that finer substance which is compatible with the world beyond the flesh, but to that which functions through these bodies. In other words, the image of God. And that image, which is the real man, is not revealed except through man's expressed thoughts and actions. Those that have been brain damaged to the point where they cannot reflect manifestations are called vegetables in psychiatric language. In other words, the image of God is unable to express creative life because the instrument through which it functions has been damaged. They're not trying to make man equal to God, but being in his image is like unto God. Man operates within and is completely subjective to the immutable laws of God. Man has free will. This permits him to choose the particular immutable laws under which he operates. He chooses. Thus, man can live in accordance with the laws of health, or he can live in accordance with the laws of disease. Nothing to do with the law. It's the way he chooses to live. Wants to pickle his liver with alcohol? He can pickle it. The immutable law takes care of that. If he stays away from it, he won't pickle his liver. But he's not breaking any laws. He's just living in accordance with the wrong laws. So man is a sub-creator. He makes combinations of ideas and things strictly in accordance with immutable law. Sometimes for better and sometimes for worse, but usually dictated by his desires and often through ignorance. This applies to the things man creates. Creating a lot of pollution, isn't it? At least that's what we hear. That's ignorance of the law. He's not breaking any laws. He's just not living according to the right laws. Now, before man can remove the barriers between his conscious self and God, he must overcome the sense of separateness between himself and other men. To do this, he must be able to recognize the image of God first within himself and then in all others. Some people don't have any trouble thinking they are God, but when they try to see it in the other fellow, they have a little difficulty. To keep on trying, you will find it's there. Man must tune his mind to receive only that which is for the greatest good for the greatest number. This he does by meditating for a short period of time each day. I don't mean 5 hours like some of the Maharishis have some other people doing. One poor girl that came from Washington was meditating 5 hours a day and trying to do her college homework at the same time. She was having a little difficulty. She almost fell apart at the seams. I told her to cut it down to 5 minutes. Maharishi didn't have anything else to do, so he could sit and meditate all day. Somebody else was paying for it. So man meditates for a short period each day, contemplating the attributes of his highest conception of the divine being. Now, we all have different conceptions of the divine being, but let's pick the highest one when we meditate and focus our attention there. Now, when this has become a habit and meditation of the highest order requires no effort, in other words, it's just like breathing, it doesn't require any effort, then man is ready to enter into the kingdom of service with confidence and safety. He is ready to open the psychic door and develop his spiritual gifts.
We have to change the tape.
Oh, is the tape run out? Pause for change of tape. I'm almost through. Means the pursuit of wisdom. Wisdom has been defined as the right use of knowledge, or the use of the most important means for attaining the best ends. Wisdom, thus, presupposing knowledge for its very existence and exercise. You can't have wisdom without knowledge. Wisdom is mental power acting upon the materials that fullest knowledge gives. and acting upon that material in the most effective way. There may be what is termed practical wisdom that looks only to material results. But in its full sense, wisdom implies the highest and noblest exercise of all the faculties of the moral nature as well as of the intellect. Knowledge is all that the mind knows, from whatever source derived or obtained, or by whatever process. The aggregate of facts, truths, or principles acquired or retained by the mind, including alike the intuitions native to the mind and all that has been learned respecting phenomena, causes, laws, principles, literature, and other things. This is knowledge. By exercising wisdom in the use of knowledge, we should gain true and just discernment, which will result in a personal philosophy acceptable to our highest sense of what is just, fair, and reasonable. The hypothesis is a comprehensive, tentative explanation of certain phenomena, and it is meant to include all of the facts of the same class, and which is assumed as true till there has been opportunity to bring all related facts or further evidence into comparison. If the hypothesis explains all the facts, it is regarded as verified. Then it is regarded as a working hypothesis until it is verified. And ours will be a working hypothesis, something that will answer for present practical purposes. A theory is a hypothesis into which more known facts fit. As it contains evidence, it is more likely to be true than a hypothesis. And this may be termed a comprehensive guess. That's what a lot of hypotheses are, comprehensive guesses. Because we have selected for study only a small portion of our spiritual path, our knowledge includes many facts and much evidence, permitting us to develop a theory with but little speculation. As an example of how a theory may be developed, you are referred to a paper authored by Dr. Horace Stewart of West Georgia College, which each one of you has a copy. Dr. Stewart wrote this on a general theory of healing. He kindly sent me a copy because I lectured at the college to the psychology class. They also have a course in parapsychology, for which they give a master's degree. Well, he treats in a scholarly manner the analysis of the facts, the evidence, the disciplines involved, the various paths that lead from disease, and in his case, the disease is the beginning, to well-being, which is the goal. From this theory, it is possible to form a personal philosophy of healing. By following similar steps, a personal philosophy for spiritual development techniques may be formed, and it is suggested that each one of you attempt to put into writing, with appropriate diagrams or charts, a flexible guide for your personal spiritual unfoldment. This you can revise from time to time as you gain further knowledge and understanding. Let's break for 10 minutes so you can get your two brain cells working, and then we'll go into the discussion period. Thank you.
May I see the lady that I spoke to in the lounge just before the meeting started? I'll identify her by saying she was smoking a cigarette. I have a message for her. So I will take the roving mic, but it doesn't rove very far. And I hope that all of you have been thinking about questions to ask. Please keep your questions to the subject matter. We don't want to go off field. I was asked a question from a young man on whether I could communicate even as far off as England. Well, I don't know quite what he means, but if he means if I can communicate psychically, yes, I can communicate all over the universe because there's no limit to your psychic powers. Now, who would like to start the ball rolling by asking a question? All right.
Yes, the question is there any way to turn off your psychic gifts?
If they should be overwhelming, or can you keep them under control?
If they should be overwhelming, or can you keep them under control? In other words, we know that there are people that have gotten into trouble by opening the psychic door before they have been given a basic understanding of the laws. And some of these have great difficulty in turning off the power, as you might call it. The reason is that they have become subjective. First of all, to answer that question, anyone who is going to open the psychic door or develop psychic gifts must first learn the first law of the mind, and that is that the mind is controlled by the individual. If he gives up control of his mind to some other individual or force, he has stepped out and he has no longer authority. So the first thing that one must learn before opening the psychic door is to control everything that goes into the mind. One of the things that goes into the mind is fear. In fact, many people's lives are ruled by fear. Don't do this or else. So before opening the psychic door, as part of your philosophy, your personal philosophy, you will include: my mind is under my control. I will keep it focused on my highest conception of the divine, and nothing can enter it that is not in tune with the divine. If you maintain this kind of thought in your mind, your spiritual, psychical, or any other kind of gift will not get out of hand. Now, we get many letters from people that have done automatic writing, and they're in real trouble. They can't turn it off. Now, there's nothing wrong with automatic writing if you have first tuned your mind to the divine. But if you've just sat at a desk with a pencil in your hand and invited anything to come in, anything will come in, You just like turning on your radio without tuning in the station. You just get whatever you've got the thing tuned to when you turn on the power. You can't do this with psychic gifts or spiritual gifts. You must control that which you are going to receive by tuning to the proper frequencies. For instance, you can't tune to love and receive hate. Yet there are some people who sit for development that have hate in their souls. And what are they going to get if they're tuned to hate? They're going to get hate, aren't they? No, you've got to tune your mind to spiritual things. And you've got to practice this before you open the door. And if you do this, you will never open the door when it's stormy outside. You will only open the door when you have reached a tranquil state of mind and are in tune only with that which is good. So a person who has found it difficult to turn off something like automatic writing or hearing of voices has first got to learn to control their own minds by tuning to the divine. And the divine is what they conceive as a power they can trust and believe in. I hope that answers the question.
But it's always wise to make sure that you know who you're sitting with, and that you're not sitting with someone whose imagination will take flight. You know what I mean? Does that answer the question?
I think when you talk about a psychic manifestation, we have to take note of the fact that there are two different kinds of psychic manifestations. One is really psychic, and the other one is a physical manifestation with a psychic source, like the movement of objects. Now, in the development of psychical faculties, sometimes we have physical manifestations, and sometimes these are not perfect. In other words, a manifestation is only as good as the conditions under which it is brought about. And I'm not talking about the degree of spirituality. For instance, a manifestation of a psychic nature may be coming through mentally, but the person is not used to receiving it and doesn't know exactly how to receive. And there again, the person has to know how the mind works. In receiving a psychic message, you give immediately what you receive without adding to it with your own mind. And this is something one has to learn. In other words, if I say black to you people, many different things will come into mind, like darkness of night, coal, black cloth, all kinds of ideas associated with the word black. But if you receive the word black as a psychic manifestation, it may not have a thing to do with the color, it may be the person's name. There are people who have the name black, you see. I saw a fish one time, to give you an illustration, in the lady's lap. Now, that's a very strange thing to see, isn't it? Until you add to it that the lady's mother had recently died and her name was Trout. You see, and she had a fish in the lap, and that's what attracted my attention. But the real meaning was to convey the fish was out of water, had gone into another life, you see, and life was continuous. So everybody is learning in a developing circle or a meditation circle. And unless they know how to receive, they may confuse what they receive with something that comes from their own storage cells in their own mind. And the same with the physical manifestation. If something were to happen while everything is tranquil, somebody would be startled at a rap on the table, for instance. The very fact that that person became startled will change the conditions and may interfere with it. I think if you just take the attitude that spirits which have departed this life are exactly the same when they get on the other side as they are here. Their minds haven't changed one bit. And there are people over there that just get a great delight out of fooling the other fellow, just like they do here. And if you sit with a Ouija board in a form of levity, like some people I know, this fellow happens to be a millionaire now, so, I mean, he was a pretty stable character, would you say? But he worked down at the plant, and he sat with a Ouija board, and a message came through that his brother-in-law had been injured and was in a drugstore on Gay Street. This is about 1 o'clock in the morning. Now, that brother-in-law worked on the night shift, and about that time he would be coming home, you see. So they're calling up all the drugstores on Gay Street, and where is the brother-in-law? He's home asleep in bed. This is the kind of trouble you can get into. Some mischievous spirit on the other side is going to have fun because you have not gone into the thing with a serious mind.
Now, let's have another question. Yes.
Just as far as your mind allows you to carry it. For instance, if you think of the electromagnetic spectrum, it is different today from what it was, say, 50 years ago, right? We keep extending it on both ends, as it were. I can also conceive in my mind of something parallel to the electromagnetic spectrum, which does not follow exactly the same Maxwell's equations, but which follows some other laws not presently defined by science. And I can conceive in my mind that these laws operate in another state of existence. I can conceive, of course, of the fourth dimension, which science uses, which puts time in there as a coordinate. I can conceive of the fifth dimension, which science calls the eternity dimension, which takes care of all of those things which science recognizes and which time does not affect. These things I can encompass in my mind. Therefore, to me, they exist. But to many people, the eternity dimension does not exist. Never heard of it, most people. So it all depends on the capacity of your mind. If you can entertain it in your mind, then it exists for you. You've observed it, in other words, not seen it with the eye or hearing it with the ear, but conceiving it with the mind. That's what I mean by observing. Well, there are some religions that, as I mentioned, try to do this. It's an escape route. When to the world's turmoil thy budding soul lends ear, when to the voice of the greatest illusion thy soul responds, when frightened by the hot sight of the tears of pain, when deafened by the cries of distress, thy soul withdraws like the shy turtle within the carapace of selfhood. Declare, O disciple, thy soul is in a worthy shrine. Yeah, I could do that too. I'm not going to. I've got my turban on.
But I haven't any time for that. Because it takes time to think about the devil worship. So why not use that valuable time for something constructive?
If you're going to open the psychic door, you better not have the devil in your mind, because you're sure going to get all kinds of stuff coming through. Oh, well. You see, that subject of praying for the dead, if you study the history of prayer, you'll find that it's been in and out in accordance with whoever was in power and whoever told people what they should do in the way of prayer. Sometimes they prayed for the dead, sometimes they didn't. But if you go back to the hymn of Cleanthes, which was written 200 and some years before Christ, you'll find very definitely in there prayers for the dead.
Are you implying that the force which brings the materialization to a thought form is spiritual or psychical?
There's only one force, and that's spiritual. The levels on which the force operates is either spiritual, psychical, physical, maybe some down below that. I haven't met them yet, but it could be. But that's the level on which it operates. Psychic is working through the mind, spiritual, of course, is working through spirit. Yes. Well, I'll tell you how you start. You start with your present concept of the divine being. You contemplate its characteristics and attributes. And as you contemplate those, you're entering into a form of meditation. And if you keep your mind open, you will receive more information on the attributes of God, so that your conception of God will change as you gain in knowledge. You can do a lot of it by reading books, but there are so many books written on religion and kindred subjects that you become utterly confused. And you can go to the same place that those people went to who wrote the books and get your own information. And that's why I say we should develop our own personal philosophy, which will be a firm basis for the development of our psychical and spiritual gifts. And this way, we will avoid the perils of opening the psychic door when the stormy weather's outside. And that's why I say there is no place in this particular philosophy for evil spirits, devils, Lucifer, dark angels, because you focus your attention only on your highest conception of the divine. And everything else is tuned out, because you realize you are opening a door to all kinds of experiences. And I mean all kinds of experiences will be yours if you don't tune your mental radio to the right station. And the reason for the personal philosophy is to have a basis for tuning your mental radio so you only receive the right programs if you don't want to get into trouble. Understand? This happened to be a rather sophisticated audience, because when we opened the meeting up for questions, a man got up and gave a dissertation on Maxwell's equations. And I said, I think Kirchhoff's equations are more appropriate to the particular situation we're discussing. And he sat down and he said, want to talk about Kirchhoff's equations.
We're striving to an understanding of an awareness of God doing.
Alexander Pope wrote a piece called Essay on Man, in which he tries to describe all of these things. And it's very long. piece of work. But if you would get that and read it, and it's a little hard to read in some places, but he is trying to put into words his understanding of God and creation and plan and all the divine plan, all of these things. For instance, he says in the beginning, "Awake, my St. John, leave all meaner things to low ambition and the pride of kings." What are the meaner things? And then he goes on and he says, "All are but parts of one stupendous whole, whose body nature is, and God the soul, that change through all, and yet in all the same, great in the earth as in the ethereal frame, warms in the sun, refreshes in the breeze, glows in the stars, and blossoms in the trees. To him no high, no low, no great, no small. He fills, he binds, connects, and equals all." Alexander Pope, I mean, there's a whole lot of stuff in there. Yes, I will explain why the beginning is now. God is always creating. The start of every creative act is the beginning. And if God is always creating, the beginning has got to be now. And I said it was a sequence of events coeval with eternity. C-O-E-V-A-L. That's a good word Alexander Pope uses also. In other words, throughout eternity, we have the beginning. And it is only because we have time and space, which confuses everything, in our conception of what things are, that we don't understand the true nature of the beginning. Think about it. You'll get it. Evolution. There is a beginning, and the immutable laws take those original ideas of God and they bring about a manifestation which condenses the original idea through forms of energy into various states of being. Like man, for instance, man was created first in what we call the unseen. Eventually he took on this physical body, which is nothing but an aggregation of particles built on a matrix form, which is a spiritual body, which was formed so that you could have a physical body. Eventually this overcoat, which we use down here, gets worn out, so we just take it off and we dwell then in another world, another condition, where we have all of our faculties, some of them much brighter than they are here, and they are compatible with that new world in which we exist. Well, very simple. If you've traveled in the astral and tried to move things, like I tried to switch the light out in the bathroom one day, and I was traveling in my astral body, my hand went right through the wall. That's the first thing I knew, that I was not in my physical body. When you have experience like this, you begin to understand these things. But you can only have these experiences if you adapt yourself to a condition by focusing your mind and waiting for the development of understanding. Just focus your mind in the right place. That's the subject today.
Well, everyone has an astral body, and everyone has a physical body.
That's the same thing as St. Paul talked about when he said there is an natural body and a spiritual body.
And we listen very closely, and as we go along with our course, we'll get a greater understanding of it. You see? But everybody has an astral body.
If you didn't, you wouldn't have a physical body. Wouldn't be possible. Let me try to explain. The pre-physical stage, you might say, is like the water stage before the water becomes ice. Now, if there were no water, there would be no ice. Now, you might say, and I can pick up somebody's thought, that well, the ice age came before the water. But in the Bible, of course, the water spread all over the earth, isn't it? It's part of the story of creation. However, whichever way you care to think about it, there are different stages or conditions of existence. And I simply used water as an example of the same thing being in different states. Now, everything has a matrix on which it is formed. We say that God, for the way of explaining, picks an idea and he gives it form. And his laws take care of bringing it into manifestation upon a certain level of existence. That level of existence can be before you have a physical existence. Just like time and space are created at the same time as a manifestation, because they are necessary to manifestation. So the image of God is created before the physical, because the physical could not come into existence without having its essence, the image of God. And the astral body is formed at the same time as the physical body, or perhaps just a little before, so it can attract to itself the physical particles through which a person is able to manifest on this particular level of existence, physical world. Let us join together in prayer. Most blessed Father God, we feel the whisperings of the Spirit surrounding us this day. We feel the mantle of truth upon us. And we rejoice and praise thy holy name, that thy perfect wisdom shall be manifested to us as we seek thy light. For this guidance, for this wisdom, for this light which is eternal and everlasting, we rejoice in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
This is the end of Lecture 1.